Florida's Gulf Coast sees a lot of hurricanes, but the strength of recent storms in the region has been significantly stronger than in years past. Hurricane Milton had maximum sustained wind speeds of 165 miles an hour Tuesday evening as it continued to make its way towards the Tampa area. At least 10 counties have been ordered to evacuate, with meteorologists and politicians alike referring to it as a potentially catastrophic storm. In a social media post Monday, Florida Senator Marco Rubio said he asked the National Hurricane Center years ago what the worst storm that could hit the state would look like. He said they showed him a hurricane that looks just like Milton's forecast. CBS News chief meteorologist and hurricane specialist Ivan Cabrera joins us now from Miami. Ivan, what is making Hurricane Milton so much worse than all the other hurricanes that have swept through Florida's Gulf Coast?
Yeah, John, good to see you here. So the same reason we've had all these intensifications of late for the most part here, and it is high octane fuel in the form of sea surface temperatures that are really just caused by human-induced climate change. The oceans are warming, and that is the key to make strong hurricanes here. So as we take a look at, Milton, it has exploded into a Category 5. It did that yesterday, has gone through some fluctuations. But I'm showing you behind here, and I'll take out the satellite from Milton so you can see all the red spots you see there are well above average sea surface temperatures. The more moisture, or the higher the temperatures at the surface of the sea here, the more fuel the storm has. So you see these little pockets here of red that continue to really fuel the storm. Check this out. This is the historical line here. And notice this little lobe here of really warm temperatures across the southern part of the track of the storm. It went from a Category 5, no coincidence that it moved through that area and then blew up into a Category 5. If these water temperatures were at least normal or below normal, we would not have had this explosive Category 5 storm. The evidence is right there for you. And then what I'm concerned about, John, is over the next few days, this Cat 5 is going to move over. Now, this isn't a climate change here. This is just an area that is typically there. We call the loop current. That's deep, warm water. And as it passes through that could intensify the storm even more so over the next coming days, or at least maintain its status as a Cat 4 or 5.
So lingering for a moment on the warmer water, does that mean both a chance for increased frequency of hurricanes or increased power of the hurricanes, or both?
Yeah, so we'll get the frequency is going to be there, and that's going to depend on the global circulations and other factors that go into a hurricane season forecast. But the storms that do form are the ones that are capable to really reach Category 4 or 5. We had a Category 5 storm in the Atlantic late June and into early July, something we've never seen before. That's the early time that has happened, and that's a clear indication of these water temperatures that have been out of control. Each storm is different. Some are bigger, some are more compact, but the intensity is directly related to those very warm sea surface temperatures.
And remind us why the Gulf Coast is more vulnerable, or is it more vulnerable to hurricanes than other parts of the seacoast in the States?
Yeah, there are particularly areas here. Great question. Particularly the Tampa Bay area. Here's the wind field as it continues to expand. If the hurricane force winds, particularly the landfall, is to the north of Tampa Bay, that area is just prone to significant flooding. And let me show you why as we zoom in here to the area. I used to live in Tampa, and I tell you, the water has nowhere to go. If you get a storm surge that comes into Tampa Bay, look at this water. It's going to go up Hillsborough Bay, nowhere to go there. That's downtown Tampa. It's going to go through the Hillsborough River, through towns, through cities there, and then Old Tampa Bay. That's another area. So you're going to get this water that just continues to pile up into this area. Davis Island's right there, and you can see just the coastline here. It is just prone to the worst storm surge, really potential across not just Florida, but the rest of the Gulf Coast states. And that's why we're concerned about this making the wrong landfall, meaning it to the north, and then having that storm surge come in over the next few days.
You're watching closely, Ivan Cabrera. Thank you so much for that insight.
We want to take you to Ocala, Florida, where Governor DeSantis is speaking about Hurricane Milton.
The eye of the storm is going to hit. I think the most recent models have it somewhere in Manatee County, just south of Tampa Bay. But I would just tell people, one, there's going to be impacts far beyond wherever the eye of the storm is. Two, you could make landfall anywhere from Citrus County down into southwest Florida. We'll know more over the next 12 to 18 hours, but just cones, all this stuff you see, the impacts will be broader than that, particularly with respect to storm surge on the west coast of Florida. I know that there's a lot of folks who have evacuated, who are in those areas, and you absolutely could get whacked with really serious storm surge. Really, almost every place on the west coast of Florida could get major storm surge. Today I held a joint call with state legislative leaders and the cabinet to brief them on Florida's efforts on the storm and about our resources that are being offered and being utilized by the state of Florida. We also did a similar call to Florida's congressional delegation. I've also spoken to the president and the FEMA administrator. We've had our request approved for pre-landfall. We will get a landfall major disaster declaration approved once the storm hits, and that will be things like debris removal and individual assistance. We still have 51 counties that are under a state of emergency. There's pretty much warnings or watches on almost the entire Florida peninsula. A lot of attention is being paid to the storm surge on the west coast of the Florida peninsula, and rightfully so, because that's probably the most serious threat to people's lives and property. But this storm is going to go across the Florida peninsula, and it's going to exit on the east coast of Florida into the Atlantic Ocean, likely still as a hurricane. So that is going to bring significant impacts all across the state. So just be prepared for that. That may mean mobile homes, even interior, other structures that may not be hurricane-proof. That could create hazards, rivers, other bodies of water. As you have more rain and you have flooding, that could be an issue. And then you could have surge on the east coast of Florida. You could have erosion. You could have different things at the coast. So this is not just an event about the west coast of Florida. That will be where the initial impacts and probably the most significant, but the impacts will not be limited there. So here we are at the Florida Horse Park. We have staging areas around different parts of the state. And there are different sites that are doing different things. I mean, for example, you go to like Lake City, you got a lot of the utility linemen there that are staged. We've had a lot of people staged in the Tampa Bay area for utility and other things. But this one right here is really good. I'm not saying Ocala is not going to have any impacts from the storm, but we fully anticipate be able to move people where they need to go very quickly once the storm passes. And we have different partners that the state contracts with. They have personnel, I think, as you see, they camp out here. This is where they are, and then they're able to respond. We got massive amounts of equipment here. Land, air, sea vehicles, supplies, generators, equipment, bucket trucks, you name it, this stuff is here. And so this is just one of many sites that are ready to go. The reason why we do state of emergency, we did it over the weekend on Saturday. We knew the storm wasn't likely to hit until middle of the week at the earliest, because you want to start amassing these resources, and that's what we've done. I think it's been really, really important. So on this property, you got over 2,000 pieces of equipment, including a lot of pumps, a lot of generators, light plants, display boards, restroom trailers, laundry trailers, forklifts, air conditioning units, electrical equipment, water hoses, bunk trailers, and rollback trucks. 400 personnel here, including riggers, equipment operators, pump crews, and drivers. Fuel trucks are also here to be deployed as needed. Florida DEM is currently in the process of completing 1,200 missions. So far, you're looking at deploying hundreds of thousands of shelf-stable meals, hundreds of thousands of water bottles, hundreds of thousands of sandbags, a lot of tarps and a lot of generators, and many other things. And so that is being resourced to the counties. And then, of course, we also have staging areas that we'll do with our pods once the storm passes. We have utilized flood protection devices in areas to protect against storm surge. We've now deployed more than 11,000 feet of those tiger dams. That's really important to protect hospitals, wastewater facilities, and electrical infrastructures. Of course, we've been outfitting counties for years now with Starlink internet, so that's going to be available to be used as needed. In terms of fuel, we amassed a lot of fuel before this particular emergency. We actually had it for Helene, didn't really need to use it for that. We have 268,000 gallons of diesel, 110,000 gallons of regular gas on standby. That's just from the state. You still have the fuel at the ports that are being brought in. But then we also have another 1.2 million gallons of both diesel and gas that are currently en route to the state. Now, I know there's been a lot of lines at gas stations. You obviously have an inordinate demand for fuel, much more than would typically happen. What's happening is there's long lines, the gas stations run out of fuel, but the fuel supply is available. So then they ask for more fuel to be brought. And so what we're doing is we've authorized Florida highway patrols to escort with the siren so they get there quicker major fuel trucks. So we've had 43 fuel trucks that have already been escorted by Florida Highway Patrol to deliver fuel to stations, particularly in the anticipated impact area. We're also working with companies like Circle K, Gate, Racetrack, Wawa, Shell, and Walmart to ensure fuel trucks are working 24/7 to keep fuel delivered as it comes into our ports. There's no longer fuel coming in to some of the West Coast ports like Tampa and Manatee, but they've got a lot of fuel there on dockside that is going to continue to be used. And I spoke with both ports of Tampa and Manatee today, and they've got a lot of fuel. So that's continuing to happen. And then fuel has been coming into East Coast ports. That's probably going to stop soon. Maybe it's already stopped now. But again, there's a lot of fuel that's on hand that can be brought out on the dockside, and that's what we're looking to continue to see happen. Debris removal from Hurricane Helene. I think most people know the counties and the cities, they have contracts for debris removal after a storm. There was not necessarily great job all around on some of the contractors in places like Manatee, Sarasota, Hillsborough counties. We saw this debris once it was clear there was going to be some type of storm this weekend. We decided to create a state support debris mission. And what we've done is we've mandated the landfills are open 24 hours. We had one county where they didn't have anyone there manning it. We opened it up forcibly, make sure that debris can be brought in. So that's Florida Department of Transportation. They've now deployed over 300 dump trucks so that work to remove debris 24/7, and they're going to continue to do it all day today and as long as they can tomorrow before we start to feel impacts from the onset of the storm. So as of this morning, Florida Department of Transportation has removed over 1,300 truckloads of debris in a little over 48 hours. That's a huge, huge amount. Now, there was issues, so the most debris was probably in the Pinellas County beaches. You also had Manatee, the barrier islands like Anna Maria, a lot of debris. That was our initial focus. Sarasota also had a lot of debris on their barrier islands, and I guess their contractor kind of left them holding the ball. So we've now surged over 100 FDOT vehicles between Manatee and Sarasota working to step in where the contractors left off. And we're going to continue doing that, again, all the way until it's no longer safe to do so. We've made a huge dent in this. The more debris we can get picked up, the less damage is going to happen, whether that's floating into the Gulf of Mexico, whether it's projectiles that go into other buildings. We have hundreds of state search and rescue personnel, a total of 26 teams embedded in potential impact sites along the West Coast to begin immediate rescue operations as soon as the storm passes, should the need arise. I know a lot of people have left, and hopefully there's not a need for a lot of rescues, but those personnel will be there if they need. We have 5,000 National Guard that are on duty. That'll expand to 8,000 very, very soon. We have a total of 34 search and rescue aircraft. We've gotten a lot of support from other states, and we thank them from that. We have 450 tactical vehicles, including 140 high-wheeled vehicles, aerial, water, and ground National Guard search and rescue teams. This is probably the largest National Guard mobilization in advance of a storm in Florida history. We also have the Florida State Guard, 10 maritime crews, 3 high-water UTVs, 2 UH-60 Blackhawks, 4 drone teams, 15 cut and toss crews, 2 amphibious rescue crews, and almost 200 Florida State Guard soldiers. Linemen and power restoration resources are being marshaled. We now have over 43,000 linemen who are being brought in from as far away as California, so we appreciate them for power restoration. We've also assisted with the evacuation of 300 healthcare facilities in the potential path of the storm. State veteran nursing homes that are currently located in the cone are accepting families of residents to shelter with them, as they are all built to withstand Cat 5 hurricane winds, and they're outside of flood zones. Florida Disaster Fund. This was activated after Ian, Idalia, and Helene. If you want to support for Milton, go to floridadisasterfund.org. This is really significant way to help people. You should be executing your plan now. If you're going to get out now. You have time today. Time will be running out very shortly if you wait any longer. Of course, there's a lot of mandatory evacs that have been done. We have done the shoulders on the I-4 and the I-75. Veterans Expressway and Suncoast Parkway tolls have been waived. Those can also be used as evacuation routes. I-4 is doing a lot better today than yesterday. Still traffic, but that's it. That's the norm for that. I-75 northbound, 20 to 30% higher volumes. Alligator Alley is pretty jammed right now. We have an unprecedented effort underway. I want to thank everyone that's been involved. It's not easy, especially when you've just responded to a Category 4 storm, Helene, to have it done. I know everybody's tired. Trust me, we get it. We're wearing out the Celsius at the state EOC, but what you're doing is important. Hang in there and let's get the job done. Okay, Kevin?
We've been listening to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talk to reporters ahead of Hurricane Milton's landfall, which is expected on Wednesday evening. DeSantis said that the current models are for it to hit south of Tampa, but we'll know more in the next 12 to 18 hours. The governor also warned residents about the storm surge, saying every place on the west coast of Florida could get major storm surge. He says 51 counties are already under a state of emergency and that the entire peninsula is either under a hurricane watch or warning, with Milton expected to leave as a hurricane. So it will keep its strength as it moves across. In addressing long lines at gas stations, DeSantis says they're moving fuel by using highway patrol to deliver it faster. He said the state has 268,000 gallons of diesel, 110,000 gallons of regular gas on standby from Helene, with more than 1 million gallons of regular gas and diesel en route. And more than 43,000 linemen are on the way to restore power from as far as California. He concluded with the message, if you're going to get out now, essentially saying time is running out. Evacuation orders are in effect as Hurricane Milton heads closer to landfall in Florida. The state is projected to hit the state's projected to hit the state's Gulf Coast as early as tomorrow night. Milton could dump roughly 18 inches of rain while heading toward the Atlantic Ocean. That path would largely spare other states battered by Helene, which has killed about at least 230 people. But Florida, which was also impacted by Helene, is bracing for those rain totals, hurricane-force winds, and storm surge in some areas as high as 15 feet. President Biden is postponing an overseas trip to Germany and Angola to oversee storm preps and response. He says federal and state officials are doing everything they can to prepare.
I've directed this team to do everything it can to save lives and our communities, help our communities before, during, and after these extreme weather events, and that's being done. That's being done. I've spoken to all the political leaders in the region, some of them more than once, and I've told them anything they ask for they can get. We've given, and we've got an overwhelming response.
CBS News correspondent Christian Benitez is in St. Petersburg, Florida. Christian, what are officials there doing to prepare for Milton?
Lindsay, well, they're warning folks that if they live in low-lying areas that they need to get out now. Now is the time to evacuate. Just earlier today, in fact, we were in St. Pete Beach, and it got to a point where they started to tell folks that once you got out, you weren't able to get back in. So there's a mandatory evacuation order in multiple parts of Pinellas County where we're located. And I mean, what officials are also worried about is this. You've got debris that is just everywhere in certain neighborhoods out here. You know, you've got people's entire lives out on the street. I mean, there are family pictures here. You've got dressers. You've got somebody's bed. And that goes on for blocks and blocks and blocks. I also want you to get a sense of something else that's happening. I mean, officials are being very, very clear about their warnings. You can see that sign right there letting folks know Wednesday and Thursday that this is an area that is likely to be flooded. Keep this in mind, that the Tampa Bay area has not had a direct impact by a major hurricane since 1921, over a century ago. All this damage that we see around us that's from Helene, you got to keep in mind, Helene was over 100 miles off the coast of the Tampa Bay area. So you can only imagine what a direct impact to this area could do. And again, as I mentioned, all we're seeing around here is all of this debris. What officials are concerned about is that when Milton comes in, all of this is going to go flying and essentially become dangerous projectiles. In addition to that, they're worried that all this debris could clog up storm drains. So there has been a rush to sort of get all this debris to certain waste areas so that they're out of the path and they're not harming people. But it's just there's so much of it. It's growing increasingly clear that they're running up against the clock, and it's just unclear that all of this will be in an area where it's not going to be a danger to people.
I mean, Christian, I don't want to call people out, but are the people in that neighborhood already evacuated? Because officials have been asking people to do exactly what you were just describing, secure as much debris in garages, et cetera, as possible.
Well, here's what I'll say. There are folks that have left. In fact, when we were out on the barrier island that we had to essentially leave, folks, that was essentially a ghost town. Right now, we're still in an evacuation zone, but we're not in a barrier island. There are folks who are leaving, but they're taking today, from what I've seen, is to just sort of gather what they can, salvage what they can, because remember that they just went through Helene, so they're still cleaning up from Helene, trying to salvage whatever they can from their home and finding a place to go. You also got to remember that there are folks who can't afford to go anywhere else, and hotels are sold out. There are shelters that people can go to, but again, it's a difficult scenario for people to be in. Officials making it clear there are certain areas that if the storm surge comes in the way it's supposed to, it's going to be unsurvivable.
Wow, and there's going to be a lot of damage if all that stuff remains unrestrained. It goes airborne. Christian Benitez, thank you. For more on the hurricane, let's bring in CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen. Tom, what has the preparation been like where you are?
Hey there, Lindsay. Well, we're in central Florida in DeSoto County. This is actually DeSoto Middle School. And Christian was mentioning that there are shelters in place around the state for people to go for security. That is one of these places. In just a few hours, this will look a lot different with people filing in to get out of potentially dangerous situations. Now, the situation here, a lot of people don't necessarily think about central Florida when it comes to a hurricane making landfall. But this is a place that has been saturated with rain from Helene and other storms that have come through. If you step on the grass over here, it is spongy. It feels like a miniature trampoline when you're walking through there. This ground cannot hold much more or absorb much more water. So there's going to be a lot of standing water. Nearby, 2 miles from here, there's the Peace River. It overflowed during Ian, caused some pretty serious flooding in this area. People are watching that river very closely for this storm system. And I want to bring in Sandra Guffey. She is actually overseeing this shelter. So, Sandra, what is the situation like inside? We know that a lot of people are expected to show up here in the coming hours.
Yes. Well, it's very calm right now. The Red Cross does a great job of welcoming the people, getting them registered, and then they find a place to hang out in the gym. And these are not very nice accommodations. I mean, it's safety. You're coming for safety, not for comfort.
Yeah, that's certainly important to keep in mind for people to be patient because they are looking for safety, security, and to get out of potentially life-threatening situations. Now, talking about some of the people who are inside, I did have a chance to speak with some of the elderly in mobile homes. Who in this community is coming into this facility?
Well, mobile homes, definitely. Elderly people that don't really have anybody else that, would watch out for them if they live alone. And people that just live in maybe homes that are older that aren't built up to hurricane standards.
And, one of the other things that's so important to keep in mind is the threat of losing power, right? This is a place where people can go for power, some food and medicine, those kinds of things, correct?
Right, yes. Power, it might go down here, even that, but at least you're out of the water and out of harm's way.
Now, talk about the operations of the Red Cross, because we did see one of those vehicles earlier. What exactly are they doing to help?
Well, they are like the shelter parents almost. They kind of make sure that everybody is fine and comforted, and they don't have medical training per se, but just to make sure that everything remains calm and cool and as happy and pleasant as can be. We also have sheriff's deputies here just for safety's sake.
Yeah, so Sandra Guffey, thank you so much for all that you're doing. We're thinking about your community. And you heard it, Lindsay, this is one of the locations where people can go if they are, in fact, heeding those warnings, which so many people are being urged to take those incredibly seriously. This is going to be a life-threatening storm, whether you're on the coast or in central Florida. People are going to get hit with this powerful storm. Lindsay.
Sandra, setting expectations, not the Four Seasons, but it is about safety. Tom Hansen, thanks so much.